Welcome to Philosophy with Shing, where we uncover the beauty behind philosophy. In today's episode, we'll be looking at the question critically assess the view that we can never eradicate skepticism. So, the idea of skepticism here will be a philosophical one, and where we look at the idea of we can never eradicate skepticism, we can branch this idea into two. First, can we eradicate skepticism? If so, why? How? If we cannot, why? If we have already said, or if we have established that we can never eradicate skepticism, we can ask ourselves, should we eradicate skepticism? Why? So, just because we cannot eradicate skepticism does not mean that skepticism is a bad thing. That is something to understand. So just because we can never eradicate skepticism does not mean that we should be striving to eradicate it. This is different from the idea of absolute certainty as an epistemic ideal that we should be working towards, although we can never achieve absolute certainty. And if you're interested in the idea of certainty, you can check my previous video where I examined whether it's possible to achieve absolute certainty and how absolute certainty is but an ideal that we should be working towards, although most of the time, realistically, we will only be able to achieve relative certainty. Alright, so anyway, back to our main question, which is to assess the view that we can never eradicate skepticism. So in this discussion, I would be suggesting that we can never eradicate skepticism. So that would be my first argument, that we can never eradicate skepticism. So that will be answering the left prong of my annotation that you can see on the screen. And then I will go on to say, although we can never eradicate skepticism, we should also not eradicate skepticism. For many reasons. So, for that, I would say that we should not eradicate skepticism because skepticism is to doubt. And if you're doubting things, you're finding justification for your knowledge claims and your beliefs. So we should not eradicate skepticism. Skepticism ensures standards of knowledge that are met, and it also allows us to arrive at greater certainty of our knowledge. Of course, that is not to be radically skeptical and think that every single knowledge claim or JTB claim that we have is not knowledge. So there must be some form of skepticism, but not being radically skeptical. So if we were to be extremely skeptical, it could also lead to no knowledge claims. So it works both ways. If you are not skeptical at all, everything can be considered knowledge and nothing at the same time is knowledge. Because if you have such loose definitions for what is knowledge, because you are not skeptical enough, then essentially, even if you claim something to be knowledge, it might not actually, the idea of the status of a claim being knowledge would essentially be deflated. But on the other hand, if you were to be radically skeptical, then you also don't have any knowledge claims that you can claim as knowledge. So anyway, I will be sharing how I would elaborate on these arguments. So in the construction of knowledge, some inquirers have been skeptical of knowledge claims proposed, such as whether Newtonian theory of gravity is justified and whether a stick placed in water such that it appears bent is actually bent when it touches water. It seems then that we can never eradicate skepticism. We're constantly questioning the world around us, constantly questioning knowledge claims that we have. So skepticism cannot be eradicated in the pursuit of knowledge due to the fundamental limits of human knowledge and methods of knowledge construction, ranging from the subjectivity of the inquirer to the nature of knowledge constructed. Furthermore, In the quest to construct knowledge, as per Plato's tripartite definition of justified true beliefs, it appears that applying doubt to the very tenets of knowledge, namely justification, shines light on how there are limitations to justification too, highlighting the unending endeavor of skepticism. However, is skepticism necessarily detrimental to our quest for knowledge? No, due to the role of skepticism in maintaining our standards of knowledge and in allowing us to attain greater certainty within reasonable doubt of our knowledge claims. Nevertheless, moderate levels rather than radical doubt should be employed to ensure the progress of our knowledge. So here, we can never eradicate skepticism because of our limits of human knowledge. So I'm adding on to this mind map, this argument map, so that you can better follow the discussion. So why we can never eradicate skepticism is because there are limits to our knowledge and methods of knowledge construction. To be skeptical is also to doubt, and there are also problems with justification. So, well, even if there are problems to justification, skepticism is also linked to justification, which is important in the definition of knowledge, which is justified true belief. And we should not eradicate skepticism because it helps to maintain our standards of knowledge. Skepticism cannot be eradicated when constructing knowledge through experience. So I'm going now systematically to various sources of knowledge and areas of knowledge to show how skepticism cannot be eradicated. So first, we talk about the experience as a source of knowledge. Like problems of perception, such as in optical illusions, like the Amy's window, lead to what we empirically observe in the natural world being but obstructed by a veil. Kant echoes this view, proposing that we can only access phenomena but not noumena, where phenomena is only a representation of the noumena we aim to observe. Perhaps we may be observing physical entities as a shadow of its ideal forms as postulated by Plato's theory of ideal forms, and knowledge obtained from observations from the empirical world are then subjected to rigorous scrutiny due to the fallibility of human perception. Similarly, in obtaining knowledge through reason, we are met with obstacles that cast doubt on knowledge claims constructed through reason. Admittedly, of course, reason appears to be truth-preserving, especially when deductive reasoning is employed, for instance, tautologies, for example, all bachelors are unmarried men, and syllogisms like if A then B, if B then C, hence if A then C. These tautologies and syllogisms are certain and not subject to large amounts of skepticism. However, fundamental axioms may be brought to question when the foundation cannot be itself proven. So that could be in mathematics, like in the fifth parallel postulate in Euclidean mathematics, is an example of an unprovable axiom that forms the basis of much of Euclidean geometry studied in school today. Basically, it's not really, while it is possible to prove that two parallel lines cannot meet on the Euclidean plane, but it is not the case in Riemannian geometry. So even in deductive reasoning, it appears that not all knowledge claims are truth-preserving. It thus follows that seemingly a priori knowledge claims are systematically doubted too. So as you've seen, like experience, reason, they all could be doubted. And this reason can be split into inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. So I've talked about deductive reasoning just now. So now we'll talk about inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning further puts itself in a vulnerable position for skeptics due to the assumption of the problem of induction, which is the basis of much of inductive reasoning. Using Bertrand Russell's analogy of a chicken being fed in the morning every day of its life and wakes up one day expecting to be fed but is instead slaughtered, exemplifies the fallacious use of inductive reasoning in predicting events of the future based on what happened in the past. Yet, areas of knowledge like the sciences avidly employ inductive reasoning to lend scientific knowledge its predictive value. Thus, where inductive reasoning is used, inquirers remain skeptical about the certainty of knowledge claims produced. Altogether, in reason and experience, which are the examples that I've cited, two of the most widely relied upon sources of knowledge, are also subject to skepticism, suggesting we can never eradicate skepticism in our pursuit of knowledge. Since we cannot eradicate skepticism, the question remains whether we should aspire to eradicate skepticism. Is this similar to absolute certainty and relative certainty in epistemic ideals? So now that would be moving on to argument 2 and argument 3. So we should not aspire to eradicate skepticism due to the indispensable role played by skepticism in ensuring that our standards of knowledge are still met, and that not anything goes in determining what knowledge is. Skepticism is inextricably linked to doubt, which appeal to justification in Plato's tripartite definition of knowledge as justified true belief. Thus, skepticism questions the certainty of a knowledge claim based on its justification. To argue that we should aspire to eradicate skepticism would imply that the definition of knowledge be reduced to simply true beliefs, compared to justified true beliefs. This loosens the definition of knowledge and runs the risk of permitting knowledge claims obtained from epistemic luck to be counted as knowledge. So what are the problems of removing justification from our definition of knowledge? This would essentially pose the question of JTB versus TB. So because skepticism is linked to justification. Alright, and so if we were to remove justification, that means that some knowledge claims obtained from epistemic luck can be counted as knowledge. For instance, if John is able to give true claims about the future when sitting on a rocking chair, does that necessarily mean he knows the future? No. It could be pure coincidence or an instance of epistemic luck, where his made-up tales of the future coincidentally cohere with future events. Without justification, it appears that claims we would not usually regard as knowledge are accepted as knowledge, dangerously loosening the definition of knowledge. Furthermore, skepticism allows us to arrive at greater certainty of our knowledge. In the example of John and his rocking chair, if an indubitable foundational axiom exists that all people named John who sit on that rocking chair will be able to predict the future, one can claim that John's claims about the future are considered knowledge due to the existence of foundationalist justification. Similarly, knowledge obtained about the natural world is justified by the reliabilist theory of justification due to scientists employing the reliable Baconian scientific method to construct scientific knowledge. Thus, by engaging in skepticism, we are able to pinpoint the justification or lack thereof of a knowledge claim to show that there are good reasons for belief and accord the claim greater certainty. So if justification is secured, there will be greater certainty. And certainty definitely is an epistemic ideal that we should be striving towards. Because if we are certain about certain claims, then we can build on from there, and the knowledge that we produce will be able to benefit society even more greatly. However, some may argue that the notion of certainty that skepticism aids knowledge claims in attaining is elusive due to the limitations of theories of justification that therefore do not grant knowledge claims justification. Thus, they claim skepticism does not bring more certainty to knowledge. Citing the Agrippan trilemma, critics posit that appealing to foundationalist justification falls prey to infinite regress, while coherentism exhibits circular reasoning and reliabilist theory of justification is dogmatic. So you can go to my previous video if you're not sure about Agrippan trilemma, because I mentioned it there as well. So while these are the limitations of the theories of justification, which skepticism appeals to in according greater certainty to knowledge claims, in the construction of knowledge, a combination of theories of justification are used to complement one another to provide good reasons for beliefs, rather than a singular theory being employed. Hence, the limitations of justification are actually not as troubling as they are made to sound. Additionally, would inquirers rather have good reasons for holding a belief, although these reasons may be slightly flawed, or no reasons to hold a belief at all? Obviously, having justification and these theories of justification are arguably more beneficial than detrimental to knowledge construction. So essentially, what I'm saying is that even though okay, we established that skepticism is linked to justification and justification is good because there are problems to if we were to remove justification from the definition of knowledge. However, some people think that there are problems with theories of justification. So actually, the justification aspect of the definition of knowledge, which is justified through belief, is not necessarily a good thing either. However, I think that I would argue that the limitations of justification do not really outweigh the benefits of having justification as a condition in the definition of knowledge. So, because we would rather have good reasons for holding a belief, which is we would rather have justifications, although these justifications might be slightly flawed, than have no justifications at all. If we were to remove justification as a term or a condition for the definition of knowledge. Additionally, now moving on to the argument 3, we should not aspire to eradicate skepticism because being absolutely not skeptical about knowledge claims is a dangerous endeavor. By removing skepticism as a process for knowledge construction, we are suggesting a spirit of gullibility where anything goes to be considered knowledge. At best, there could be contradicting claims that confuse us, such as the holes on the moon are due to craters and the holes on the moon are where rats ate the moon because the moon is made of cheese. At worst, the lack of skepticism could condone socially dangerous acts that threaten societal stability and safety. For instance, without skepticism, a statement such as murder is moral could be counted as ethical knowledge and lead to harmful actions being done to society. This indicates that we should not eradicate skepticism, and given that these examples are but hypothetical, indicates that we can never eradicate skepticism either. So we should not eradicate skepticism due to social factors. Also, our idea of having a stricter definition of knowledge is also important. And there could be like confusing claims that could simultaneously be counted as knowledge, like the idea about whether the holes in the moon are due to craters or the holes in the moon are due to cheese, moon being made of cheese. Yet at the same time, while we can never eradicate skepticism, we should not resort to radical skepticism. So although we cannot eradicate skepticism, we should not resort to radical skepticism. Why? Because this will lead to the impediment of advancements in human knowledge. So Cartesian doubt, a method of radical skepticism, involved Descartes systematically questioning all beliefs he held until he arrived at one that he could not deny, cogito ergo sum, which is I think therefore I am. He then sought to build his body of knowledge through basing all knowledge claims upon cogito ergo sum. Evidently, the application of Cartesian doubt limits the wealth of knowledge we can construct because any claim constructed will come under rigorous questioning. A claim like all humans have free will lead to objections like the evil demon could be controlling our every action, leading to next to no meaningful knowledge constructed. However, for useful and meaningful knowledge to be made that can both expand humanity's knowledge and be applicable to our lives, I argue that moderate skepticism should be employed. So radical skepticism narrows our wealth of knowledge. As such, while we can never eradicate skepticism, we can employ moderate skepticism in constructing our knowledge claims. Skepticism is not necessarily a detrimental thing that undermines knowledge either, due to its role in the construction of knowledge in order for knowledge to progress towards its epistemic ideal of certainty. So notice here that actually skepticism is not only something that people are, like you can be a skeptic, it's also a process. Skepticism is also a process of evaluating whether or not a knowledge claim is justified, as mentioned in argument 2 just now. So this is a zoom out picture of our argument outline, and that marks the end of our discussion on the question critically assess the view that we can never eradicate skepticism. Hope that you enjoyed it and see you at our next episode. Goodbye.